Chapter 2, Baby Gilmore out of India. Children's behavior is usually motivated by desire. Mine was no different. My constant striving for validation, affection, and love often manifested itself in provocative displays. My birth mother was a provocative child, rumored to be not only uncommonly beautiful but also overly friendly. This over-friendliness ran through my blood, too. My birth mother, Maureen, was pregnant at age 15 and gave birth to me at age 16. Those green saucer eyes of hers got her into trouble, I reckon. My soon-to-be parents lived in a compound behind a 7-foot-high brick wall. The compound consisted of a hospital, a dental school that was part of a larger dental hospital, a seminary, and their house. The dental school had the latest state-of-the-art dental equipment, so that's where foreigners from all over India went for dental work. The mission's dental school saw a lot of patients. Bareilly was only a 5 or 6 hour drive from New Delhi, many of whom were regulars. A nurse who worked at the local orphanage reached out to my mom, thinking she might be able to help with a baby who had been brought in. The girl had been surrendered by her family 2 months earlier and was now deteriorating in health and not much more than skin and bones. When terrible sores began to threaten the infant's life, my mother went every day to care for and hold the baby girl. Eventually, my parents took her to their home and began to care for her full-time. The baby, named Shireen, recovered and began to thrive. News of my parents' new baby girl spread, and the mission was excited for them in their role as new parents. Before long, one of the dental patients, a nurse from Lucknow, asked my parents if they might be interested in taking another baby. She was friends with Dr. Stringham and his wife, the couple running the psych hospital in Lucknow. Their friends were diplomats from Canada, whose teenage daughter was expecting a baby in a few months. They were trying to find a suitable couple willing to adopt this Canadian child. As my dad tells it, he said, "Sure, if nobody else wants the baby, we'll take it." At this point in the story, my father always laughs. Dr. Stringham began to correspond with my parents, acting as the contact person between them and the pregnant teenager's parents. My father and mother never had any direct contact with the Canadian family. When the time finally came for them to go to New Delhi, my parents were ready with a letter signed by Dr. Stringham on behalf of the birth mother. They went to the Holy Family Hospital as per the arrangement and attempted to give the letter to the hospital staff, who promptly waved it aside and handed the white baby to the white people. It was 5 a.m. They had arrived early in an attempt to beat the heat of the day, and they had a long drive back home, so they left with me. They hadn't signed anything or received any documentation. They just went on their way. And this is how the adoption process started, with their applying to the Indian courts in Bareilly to legally adopt my sister and me, so that they could return to America with us. Adoption by Christians was not all that accepted in India at that time, as only 3% of the population identified as Christians. The courts had difficulty understanding how we came to be in our parents' care. There was no proper paperwork for me, a Canadian baby in India, no father listed. Good luck with that. My parents should have saved themselves all the stress and just lied, but they were good people and so patiently and painstakingly went through the process. Shireen and I remained blissfully oblivious to the fact that we were almost seized and taken away from them. We just played under the big wooden desks as my parents pleaded with the judges, trying to explain why they had no proof that we had indeed been handed over to them. Other than the agreement letters they had signed for guardianship of us, India had no real way of dealing with Americans adopting Canadians within its borders, and it was incredibly difficult to get the proper paperwork from the U.S. Department of Immigration once the court finally did give its approval for my parents to bring Shireen and me to the United States based on their intention to adopt. I was finally accepted into the States just 2 days before we were to depart from India. Many months later, in a South Dakota courthouse, and the adoptions of one brown kid and one white kid from India were granted to the nice Methodist couple. We moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota, my parents still fresh from their mission work, and my mom now pregnant. Before long, Shireen, the eldest daughter, and I were adjusting to our new baby sister, Heather. I battled ear infections monthly, likely caused by sticking all manner of things in my ears and nose. I had an amazing talent for getting up to things. From wrestling with geese at the man-made lakes of Golden Valley, the suburb of Minneapolis where we lived, to hiding in the church closets during service. With optimism in their hearts, my parents sought out their next mission from the church. They were unable to renew their visas to India through the Board of Missions, likely something to do with funding. So they were asked to consider the Congo. There was a possibility of setting up for training for dental therapists in Kinshasa. Half the cost would be paid for by the United Methodist Church Mission Agency, and half by the Congolese government, headed up by Goodwill Mobutu. The Congo had just produced its first 5 Congolese dentists. My dad asked these dentists if they might supervise the dental therapists he trained, and he even visited several towns with these brand new dentists. Although it was becoming increasingly clear that this was no time for foreigners in the Congo to start up some new, and too many there, wacky dental therapy program, my parents wanted to go to investigate the possibility nevertheless. It is amazing to me now to think that they were seriously considering moving all 5 of us to sub-Saharan Africa. What a life changer that would have been. My little sister was less than a year old when my parents left for the Congo, a fact that, I suspect, causes my mother a lot of hand-wringing to this day. Shireen was 3, and I'd just turned 2. We two older girls stayed with a family who had a daycare in their home with as many as 10 or 15 kids there every day. We would be staying with this family for the entirety of my parents' sojourn. Heather stayed with a lovely young couple who could devote their time to a baby. Breakfast every morning involved all those white kids. I identified myself as an Indian kid like my sister, though the reality was that I was white as well, who attended the daycare standing around my sister and me as we ate our cereal at the kitchen table, still in our pajamas. They didn't speak to us. They just stared. I can't even remember feeling anything at all in response to this early effort to alienate my sister and me, or so it seemed to us. Even though we were staying there and they were there just for the day. People trying to alienate us was something we battled throughout our childhood years spent at public schools. It was an action built on bigotry, and not helped by the fact that we moved to a new city every couple of years, just like military brats, so that we were always outsiders. Within months, upon their return from Congo, my parents and the Board of Missions had grown unhappy with each other and mutually agreed to part ways. With only 3 more weeks of pay coming to him, my father was faced with looking for a new job, so he found an opening in a program in a place a far cry from India and Africa, but exotic nonetheless.